Hello and good afternoon. Welcome back to the continuation of our session. I hope that you enjoyed this break or you had an interesting panel discussion with a previous side event. Now we continue with the agenda item 13, the implementation of United for Smart Sustainable Cities initiative. And in this part, in the first part, we discussed about the challenges and priorities for San Marino, and we heard a lot of problems with institutional settings and decentralization, and also problems with transportation and their priority to develop this continuation of tourism, but also to handle the, as San Marino is a historical city, the priority for heritage buildings. Then we heard also from Georgia, both from local and from Tbilisi and from national levels, their views on how to go forward with smart sustainable city. And now I'd like to invite the REM advisory group members to share their views on the smart sustainable city profiles, and I highlight areas of possible support. I have in this panel distinguished speakers, Ms. Paloma Taltavul de La Paz, Chair of the Real Estate Market Advisory Group. She is Professor of Departamento de Análisis Económico Aplicado, Universidad de Alicante in Spain. Mr. Donovan Ripkema, Member of REM, President, Heritage Strategies International, United States. Mr. Arsen Karapetian, Executive Director of Development Solution Institute Foundation. And Mr. Gary Strong, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, London, UK. So I give the floor to Paloma.
Thanks very much, Ms. Chair. It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation to speak here and share our thoughts and our knowledge about this interesting, this very important topic, which is how to convert our cities into smart cities and what are the main problems that the cities have. And I think that there are many different aspects that the cities should solve until to reach the level of smartness. Especially not those new cities, but also the more older cities. In Europe, we have a lot of cases, in Europe and Asia, we have a lot of cases of cities that has long life from 2,000 years old and face very important problems, especially those that are also becoming central cities in the economy and in the society. And well, if you let me to decide 3 topics that could be the hot topics, or from my view, these 3 topics is: 1, how to maintain our culture in the buildings area, in the stock. So heritage buildings are one of the main focus for a lot of research now in Europe, trying to discover or find a way how to update this part of the stock which contain not only the space for services or for life, but also part of our history. So this is one hot topic here, and we are working with other groups in other countries, specifically in this topic. The second is the challenge that the cities are facing, which is how to transform the city into a net zero city, net zero emission city. A lot of people have talked about this today. The previous session was quite interesting, showing different possibilities, but the fact is that everybody, all the governments, people are fully on the way to what to do. The problem is how to do it. This is a very important thing, and so if we combine both, the first and the second, we face one of the main important challenges for us. And the third topic I'm going to talk about a bit more is mobility. I was very interested this morning about the focus of how to transform the population mobility in a city in order to be less contaminated. Mobility is mostly made by cars and by buses that increase the emissions, so it creates a lot of problems, especially because last 15 years, I would say 15 years, the cities tend to be larger and larger because there are much more people entering. There is like a cycle in the facts that promotes that cities that centralize economic activity increase the mobility of the population. One is the attraction of the population that try to live inside, associate to industries, well, industries, small industry firms, IT firms, or central firms that require high-level educated workers, and the workers tend to enter in the city, so the city is attracting this type of workers. But second is that all these activities requires labor and more workers, and some workers are expulsed from the city due to lack of affordability in the housing market, and then creating more and more commuting. So if we think that this phenomenon start to appear, not start to appear, but start to grow about 15 years ago, now is increasing more and more. And many countries are talking about how people are concentrated time to time in cities and creating these movements and these dynamics inside the city. So the result is mobility, and the problem is the excess of emissions when this mobility is done with the current vehicles and the current system. So I just want to say a couple of things about this. First of all, the mobility has different impacts depending on which type of mobility is. So we can see in the big cities and the medium-sized cities different types of mobility. Tourist mobility is one. Commuting workers is another. And the commuting workers have two directions, and then it depends on when they start and where the place of work is and where they live, the mobility could have a different effect. So one of the more important things I think that the city should know is what these type of dynamics are. So what type of mobility is facing in order to implement solutions. The solution for favor the mobility. I think that it's not how to say, to see the mobility is something negative, doesn't recognize the dynamic of the city. The city is something that is changing continuously. And the population and mobility of population is creating these dynamics, and the result of the dynamics is wealth for the city. So how to know, knowing the type of mobility is important to take the specific decisions. Thanks very much. I wait for the discussion later. Oh. Yeah. You want me to moderate? Yeah.
Well, I would love to hear from you, Gary, about the issues of heritage building and also the issues that are associated not only with maintaining or renovating, but also the issues of safety, because there are two blocks. One is the safety issues, and one is basically maintaining the heritage building. And what does that mean? Because many of our cities have lots of heritage buildings that need to be upgraded. Thank you.
So thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished colleagues. So my role at the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors in London, I'm the Global Building Standards Director, so we have a lot of experience of of dealing with cities like Tbilisi, for example, where I was quite interested in the city profile in the presentation this morning. They were talking about building safety and fire safety issues, for example, which is not unusual, and actually quite a lot of cities have got similar experiences to that. And it is something which we can share and help and support cities like that because of the international expertise that does exist. And they don't need to think that they're kind of on their own trying to plow their own furrow. But some of the Soviet-era buildings, which were constructed in the 1950s and the 1960s of solid concrete, actually are pretty solid buildings. And unless they're large panel system buildings which have got issues, sometimes those buildings are pretty sound, subject to survey. But obviously retrofitting them for insulation, improving the insulation, particularly with the energy crisis, is going to be really important, and how we go about that without necessarily demolishing them. And we heard, I think, just today about sometimes demolishing buildings is not necessarily the most sustainable way forward. So we certainly advocate keeping the buildings, but repurposing them and retrofitting them in a safe way to make sure that they comply with international codes around means of escape, fire safety, alarms, sprinklers, all that type of thing, which you can fit. But you do need that international experience to help cities that don't have that experience. And some of the discussions we've been having just here this week, actually, with some of these representatives of the countries and cities is really important, so that they can reach out to us on the Real Estate Markets Group, and we can tap into the huge amount of expertise that we do have within the REM group. In terms of heritage buildings, I might hand over to my colleague on REM, Donovan, who's an expert in this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gary, thank you. First of all, you've all now been in San Marino. What a fabulous place. If you haven't been in Tbilisi, go. It is just one of the great cities. I've been there a number of times. It's a wonderful place to live and a wonderful place to visit, so please go to both of them. The commonality, of course, of both of these cities is this incredible collection of heritage buildings in dramatically different physical condition between San Marino and Tbilisi, but it really shows the opportunity. I read the city profiles, and congratulations all of those who worked on them. They're just very good and seem to me focused in on the right kinds of issues. I just want to add, really for both cities, a caveat, and that is we've heard about tourism, and internationally, heritage tourism is people stay longer, they spend more per day, they visit more places, so the impact of heritage-based visitors versus tourists in general is decidedly greater. There's a premium that comes from that particular kind of visitor. So I'm not diminishing, it's a great part of an economy. What I want to caution in that to think about economics and heritage buildings and only think about tourism is a mistake. The economic contributions of heritage buildings are vastly more than just bringing in tourists. And around the world, in the case of Tbilisi, for example, there's a real growth and a hope for growth in the ICT industries. Well, around the world, there is a preference, a market preference of those young workers to be in a cool place, not just some high-rise, to be in a cool place. So a disproportionate choice of being in the heritage building. So it's a real opportunity. But I think that also we have to really integrate the reuse of heritage buildings as part of our overall sustainability strategy. I want to point out that in the declaration that we all adopted on Monday, the number 2 principle is cultural identity, values, and heritage. When planning, design, and architecture, respect the identity and cultural heritage of places and buildings, as well as the cultural values and traditions of communities. So it really is at the heart of that whole kind of sustainability framework. And then, since we're lucky enough to have the chair who used to direct the Pritzker Prize, right, and the great great award, the biggest architectural award in the world, that a year ago, the winners of that were architects, a pair of architects that did mostly adaptive reuse of buildings. And I just want to reinforce what Gary just said. Here's the quotation from Anna Lexon, the winner. She said, "Transformation is the opportunity of doing more and better with what is already existing. The demolishing is a decision of easiness and short term. It is a waste of many things, a waste of energy, a waste of material, a waste of history. Moreover, it has very negative social impact. For us, the architectural team, it is an act of violence." Well, that's what we ought to think. It's not that nothing should ever be demolished, but that should be the last set of choices, not the first.
Thank you.
Question, I just want to ask a question. So, you're saying heritage-based tourism, one has to think about the economics of it. So what does this mean? What does this mean, heritage-based tourism? One has to think about the impact on the heritage buildings and not only the economics. So, I mean, the heritage-based tourism is a very important.
It is.
So they should limit the visits to the buildings?
Well,
they should ban them from entering the buildings? I'm just...
Well, I'll try to my best to answer that. And I apologize for this analogy, but the only thing I can do. I'm an American and I grew up in the West, and my father owned a cattle ranch. And in the cattle business, that in the fall, when you cull out animals, you get rid of the worst ones, you don't get rid of the best ones. And conversely, when you sell animals, you keep the best, you get rid of the lesser ones. That's how we need to think about our cities. But critical to that kind of operation is the control of capacity. That my father's ranch could carry about 400 cows. Well, you could put 500 cows in there, and the first year going to make a little more money. But the second year, it's going to start to slide, and the third year, you're going to have cows dying and calves not being born because of the lack of resources, of food. Well, that's how we need to think about our heritage cities. It's that there is a carrying capacity. There is an amount of people that we can maintain without diminishing the quality of the resource itself. But when we push for one more visitor, one more tourist on top of that, all we are doing is diminishing the quality of those resources. And heritage in particular, it's always a vulnerable resource. And when it's overused, what we're doing is thinking very much in the short term. And when they've been here for 600 years in this city, 700 years, so they've lasted a long time. But if we begin to overuse them, instead of thinking the long term and thinking short term, we're going to destroy the resource that is generating the resources.
May I add something very quickly? We have several experience that cities that are recover our historical buildings and protected and maintain the historical buildings, and the historical buildings is a distinction, a sign of distinction of the city. So the city compete each other, attracting companies, wealth, activity, due to these differences. So it's not a matter, it's not only, which is for me one of the more important issues, it's not a matter of protect your culture and protect your history, it's also a matter of distinction, that is what is working, is supporting the economic growth.
Thank you. Actually, regarding the historical buildings, I think there is a need to create, first of all, a database for historical buildings. I think it should exist. But in any case, the database can be enriched by doing several activities. For example, energy audits of the existing buildings to find out what's the thermal resistance of the buildings in order to maintain them properly for future, because this element, I mean the thermal protection of buildings, is one of safety issues for the buildings, and can be created like passports for each building, And based on that, I mean, a database can be created to know about all activities which have been done regarding that particular building. This history should be kept carefully and properly. And also maintenance and operation guides should be developed to provide to property managers to follow the guides properly. These kind of things, and I think the historical buildings has a great value, as you mentioned, and these type of activities are crucial.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to come in on that because I think standards are really important. So when you talk about construction standards, there are lots of different standards in lots of different countries, and some of them are similar and some not so similar. And that in my world, what we spend a lot of time doing is reconciling and gap spotting between the different standards and codes that may exist in different countries. But for example, I am chair of the International Fire Safety Standards Coalition, which you'll hear more about later on this afternoon. But it's really interesting how in some countries they don't have that kind of basic knowledge of what the standards should even be. And there is a lot of expertise that can help with standards for construction, for new build and for retrofit, but also when it comes to maintaining existing buildings as well. So if you're living in an existing apartment block, for example, what are the standards for maintenance of the building? How safe is it? Is there a fire risk assessment, for example, carried out of the building every 5 years? Who maintains the fire alarms, if there are any fire alarms? All that type of thing is really important. And this is where I think collaboration internationally through the good offices of the UNECE can really help it, because we can share that knowledge. And actually where there's best practice, we can develop that best practice and help countries that really struggle with some of this. So it's not just about new construction or even retrofit, it's about the existing buildings as well. And the standards are really, really important for this part of it, and standards and guidance that follows the standards as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now moving on to the issue of mobility. So, okay, this is a very tough dilemma because there is the spatial aspect of it and then there is a practical aspect of it. So mobility means more pedestrian streets, more public transport. But what does it mean when you want to start rethinking your streets? What does it mean implications for the budget, the public purse? Because if you want to say public transport, it's very expensive to maintain. They have to charge, and if they want to charge extremely cheap, then they will not be able to maintain the public transport. So it's not that, you know, it's important to also think about this. And San Marino, they literally have no streets, you know. The streets are 4% of the entire republic. So, and people cannot all bike, right? So how to solve this?
Difficult to solve. I think that every city can design their own solutions, depending on the type of mobility. You have one mobility, far mobility, which is the commuting, which should be done by or public transport or private. But if the mobility, the normal commuting is around 10 kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers is the normal one. The maximum affluence of people are coming from these distances to the city center. And to have good system of transport is good. If the transport is in electric, that's much perfect because it doesn't emit. So the migration to transport that is zero emission transport in electricity is okay. In the future, when we have the cities, net zero cities, as this morning has said, probably green energy could charge this means for this transport. So the emission is going to be reducing time to time as the cities are implementing systems to have energy, green energy, which is quite relevant now, important. I have seen that, for instance, in some countries like Germany or France and Spain as well, people are starting to put plaques as much as possible in order to try to find them cover in terms of energy, and there is a system that you can connect your car, electric car, to this system. So this is coming, and this could be one solution for reducing the dependency of the energy from abroad, which is one of the key issues now for the cities, and second, to reduce the emissions. It's taking time to come, but I think that is the way. We are on the way. And saying that, every city should think about. So there are countries with speed trains just connecting one part to the other of the city. The speed train is electric based. So this could be one of the solutions. For San Marino, for instance, I understand very well because I live in a city that is 600 meters up in front of the sea and with similar ways, right? And the dependence of the population that are moving out to work and then coming back, which is the basic commuting, I think, in this city, require probably a solution that paths to have a more public transport electric base. But I think that those that knows better the specific characteristic of the cities has to take the specific solution. There is no one solution for everybody. It's my view.
Just to finish the first topic, I recall that San Marino is a member of EU, yes, and there is a need for harmonization of. They haven't?
Sorry, no, they're not. They're not a member of the EU. No, they don't have the acquis. They didn't sign any association agreements.
But
They have special
in any way,
agreements.
actually, it would be beneficial if they will harmonize the EU directive on building materials and constructions. It's 109, yes? I just opened this. 89/109.
Yeah, but there are several of them. Then there is the lifts, and then there is the issue of the EU harmonized standards versus ISO standards versus. I think you need to comment on that. It's just complicated.
And regarding the transportation, actually, Paloma will understand me well. I think there is a need for economic cost-benefit analysis. And the determination of the demand for transportation is very tough, challenging task. But there are specialists, economists who can assess this.
Yeah, should I just come in on that as well? I think going back to mobility, there are issues of inclusive design. So for disabled people, elderly folk, etc., who can't get around so easily. So those of you who've been walking around this city, I'm sure will realise you have to be quite fit to walk up and down all the many, many steps, unless you're walking around the roads with the zigzag roads. But mobility is really, really important, and that is increasing, I think, in many, many cities, actually, where we have to make sure we have inclusive design. So whether that's disabled toilets or lifts to get people up and down, or even simple ramps to get from the road up onto the pavement if you're wheelchair bound, is really important as well. So these standards and guidance that exist in many countries can really help around this. There's international standards, the ISO standards, there's the EU Energy Performance of Buildings directives as well. So there's lots out there actually that can be used for many cities to try and use and just see what's actually being developed in other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for discussion. I would like to come back to the issue of building heritage and the need to protect, to maintain, and well, it's because of my opinion, perhaps personal, that we should at maximum save what we have, inherit it. So demolishing is easy, and when a beautiful plan is done for the city, demolishing the buildings built during the socialism, for those that have lived and has emotions and are so much connected with this, it's a transformation that perhaps other developed cities has suffered this in previous year, but perhaps it's our sake now that we have to pass through this. But I don't think and I don't believe that building modern building and high tech today is the only way for making modern a city.
Well, related to that exactly, I'm not a tourism expert at all, but I was on a panel once with a guy who was, and he had a sentence that just has struck me ever since. And that was, if you build it for the locals, the tourists will come. If you build it for the tourists, only the tourists will come. So I think in all of these decisions, we ought to start first about saying, what do we need to do for our citizens? Everything else is gravy.
Exactly, this is also what I was meaning, and I also read some time ago a research that a colleague from Italy has done about the cities in Italy. Do they belong to the citizens or do they belong to the tourism? And do we build for the sake of tourism? Of course, it's an income that is coming and generates a lot of economy, but we have first to think also for those people that are living in that city. And that's why I like very much what you said. About the mobility, we were also discussing with Marta after the meeting, and about how to reduce this mobility, not reducing the mobility of people, but the need for mobility. So how to connect better employment with housing, because this is what makes more increase the need for mobility. And yeah, perhaps it's a very difficult question, and it has been historically a challenge to provide housing next to employment opportunities. And when this happens, then we have this increase of prices in the housing market. So there are very difficult equation that city managers has to address, but in cooperation with urban planners, with architects, with economists, with scientists, and with innovation, with technology. And what you also mentioned about the safety and the standards of building, and also the data set for heritage building is so much connected with development of technology. And also what is recommended nowadays, a use of building information modeling in the process of planning and building, which gives you the whole information for the whole building, not only for transparency, for safety, but also for easing the management of the whole process. So we have these complex tasks to match together, and I think that REM is in a good position to help us.
Can I just ask, just to explain exactly how can you help our cities concretely? So what type of help and support? Because just in like 20 minutes.
1 to 3.
I'm just kidding. 1 to 3.
1 to 3. So as you see, we are a group of experts. Each one is expert in different topics, but one common area is planning. So we can help well explaining our view and how to define the plan urban plans from different perspectives, because urban plan is one of the more regulated tools for order the city performance and the city life, and is different in every country. So probably we cannot agree with just one model, but what we can do is to explain as much as possible and clearer than possible how the urban plans are designed, are ordered, and why, and the need that urban plans, both general plans at national level or regional level, and urban, just at city level, could be coordinated, could or should cover in order to help the city to work better. So we can give our perspectives, and we can do documents for that, because it's not only our word, it's what we know for the cities. And if we think that this helps cities, we are here for doing it.
Should I say something? Thank you. Actually, I see this, that activity in this way, like for, drafting in what we said, these initiatives, these actions, and drafting some small TORs, terms of references for each action, like how we see that, like detail them, and in bullet points just, and provide these as recommendations for the cities. Yes?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, actually, that obviously there's a lot of expertise within the REM who can help, but there's also a wider pool of experts as well that each of us have got within our own organisations, which we can tap into. And I think there's a lot of international experts that might want to charge consultancy fees that might be quite high, but we at REM are volunteers, right? So we're here in a voluntary capacity, so if we can help, then we will do. And I think this is where you don't have to have lots of resources to be able to tap into the expertise that just gives you the information. You don't know what you don't know is kind of an expression we often use. And so we can just help you with that in terms of pointing you in the right direction towards the right kind of data collection in the first place, and then how do you then take that forward into developing the models that you might want to develop for your particular city. Thank you.
Also, we can provide like good examples of country profiles and smart city profiles to the cities to have a look and get familiar with.
Okay, there are a lot of ideas, and I'm sure that even during the meetings that we have with the Bureau, we can make more concrete, you can make more concrete proposals, and we can transmit to you also more concrete needs that comes from countries and from cities. I would like to open for questions and comments from the audience. Are there questions? Yes? Irina?
Yes, thank you, Doris. Irina Perfanova from Bulgaria, member of REM group. What I would like to stress is that in the documents UNECE have concerning some practices and standards, probably we have to stress about the electricity opportunity for charging the cars in the future buildings and in the old buildings. The case which we have now is that in many of the buildings it's not possible because the local standards in the countries are not obliged for the developers to include this opportunity. But we see that people ask for this opportunity. So we can do this recommendation for for the future developments, and when the buildings are under reconstruction, to include this opportunity for each one client who has a place for parking the car. In many buildings, these places are a part of the common area, and it creates a case who will pay the future expenses for the electricity. So probably it will be involved as well in the condominium management recommendations of the UNECE. So this is really active case on the market, and we have to adopt it as soon as it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Irena. Yeah.
Irina, actually it's solvable, and property developers are to bear some part of the expenses for electricity. This is regulated.
Probably in some countries, but not in Geneva.
Not in all countries, and perhaps these developers may be obliged, but there then is the relation with the electricity company, the one that manages the electricity, if they allow to put this into their network, or so it's not just an obligation of
yes, it does. In that case, I mean, regulation should be analyzed. We should see the regulations, and if it is missing, then it should be added.
Yeah, my see in the future. So the problem with excess emissions in buildings, especially in heritage buildings that are difficult to be intervened because they are protected, it's happened everywhere, is the type of energy we use. So if we are going to a model with a city zero emissions, we probably will see, it's a 6 now, we'll see clubs of energy, where some buildings could produce green energy and give to another buildings to perform the buildings. So this cuts the emissions completely. So there are solutions. The thing we can see is not stop or not focus only in the regulation in order to force the players to do one thing, but see about the new technologies, the new solutions that are. I have not seen so many people researching in new possibilities than the previous 5 years. So there are a lot of groups trying to find solutions for buildings. So let's promote this process, because as much as new how to say, tools, programs we have to make the city net zero, we will solve the problem soon. So
Right.
let me just...
Thank you. We have to
Just
close.
one addition, sorry.
Very briefly.
In that case, the buildings should be assessed from structural soundness, whether they are acceptable from structure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we don't have more time for further questions and comments. I read the decision for that. We take note also of the comments that were done here, and they will be reflected in the report. While the decision follows, the committee welcomes the development of smart sustainable city profiles San Marino and Tbilisi, Georgia, and approve the publication of these city profiles as official publication in English and Russian, digital and print. Takes note of preparations underway for developing the smart sustainable city profiles for Podgorica, Montenegro, welcomes the development of the proposal for the EC Smart Sustainable City Project Connector to support investment projects based on the recommendations of the city profiles, and invite member states to provide financial and in-kind support to the proposed project. Thank you. And now we pass to the agenda item 14. I thank you very much, the panelists. Agenda item 14 is activities of the Geneva UN Charter Center for Sustainable Housing and Smart Sustainable Cities. The relevant supporting document for this agenda item is ECE/HBP/2022/5. I would like to inform you that the network of the Geneva UN Charters of Excellence is closely working with the Secretariat on the implementation of the committee's program of work. The activities of the Center of Excellence will be presented to the committee just right now. And I invite Mr. Stefan Getz, Director, Center of Excellence on Youth Homelessness Prevention, Professor and President of the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, York University of Canada. Mr. Alberto Cendoia, Architect, Architecture, Design and Technology Unit from Norman Foster Foundation. Mr. Alexander Hejazi, Center of Excellence on Smart Sustainable Cities and Sustainable Urban Development, University of Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Matteo Tarantino, Center of Excellence on Smart Sustainable Cities and Sustainable Urban Development, University of Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Michele Lertora, ex-SUF, Center of Excellence on Sustainable Finance for Infrastructure and Smart Cities of Italy. And I invite Hannah to brief the committee about the activities of the Center of Excellence that were not able to be among us today. So, yes.
I'll do that towards the end. I just want to highlight which ones from Glasgow and from Estonia. They weren't able to join us today and they extend their apologies. They had unexpected developments. Thank you.
I give the floor to Mr. Stefan Getz.
Okay, thank you. I want to invite up to join me Melanie Redmond, who's President and CEO of Away Home Canada, a national coalition dedicated to preventing and ending youth homelessness, and Amanda Bucknia, who's our Director of our Center of Excellence. Our Center of Excellence focuses on the prevention of youth homelessness, which, believe it or not, is a radical concept in North America, and I'd say in most countries. What happens in the world of homelessness is you can do three things, basically, to address it. One, you can prevent it from happening, stop people from becoming homeless. Two, you need emergency supports like shelters and food programs, that kind of thing. And three, you can move people out of homelessness. Oh, it's up there.
It's up to you.
Okay. I'll shout while I'm walking over.
Yes, I just...
You can do those three things, but in Canada and the United States, and I would argue in most countries, if there's any homelessness strategy at all, if there's any investment strategy, it's on that middle part, which basically keeps people in a state of homelessness and doesn't address their homelessness. It doesn't help end it. It doesn't help prevent it. So we're trying to change that around, and there's some compelling reasons why this matters in Canada, and then I'm going to hand over the details here. I'll give you two statistics. One is that 50% of all currently homeless people had their first experience before they were 25 years old. The second one is that amongst homeless youth, 40% had their first experience before they were 16 years old. And for them, we do nothing. And so what's happening in Canada is we're waiting too long to help people. You have to wait till you're 16 to get to an emergency shelter. You have to wait until you're an adult and you're old enough and homeless enough and sick enough to get access to housing. We think that this is, well, well-meaning, it's wrong. So our work is to help transform the response of homelessness, not just in Canada, but amongst all UNECE nations, to focus more on prevention so that we can help young people and their families, prevent them from becoming homeless, and focus on their well-being. The international component of the work is absolutely crucial. For us, the key paradigm-shifting moments come through engaging with people from other countries where they're doing things that we never imagined. So I'll hand it over now.
Thanks, Stephen. So yes, I'm the manager of the Toronto Centre of Excellence. While we're a relatively new Centre of Excellence among this network, our work has been ongoing for a number of years. We launched last year in June of 2021, and one of the first things that we did was work with York University, who's the host institution of our centre, to fundraise around a position to support this Charter Centre's work. So I came on board in October of 2021, and my primary role initially was to map out our existing networks of international partners and collaborators, many of whom are within the UNECE region, and to sort of identify what are some of the common areas of activity, shared goals, priorities that we could build into an initial strategy of sorts. So out of these conversations with our existing networks, we build a preliminary high-level plan to guide our efforts. And so some of the things that we've identified, particularly for the 2022-2023 year, are around particularly the emphasis and theme, I guess we would say, would be around building this international momentum for youth homelessness and prevention. So taking this high-level plan and really digging down into an action plan by creating a steering committee of our international partners and collaborators to implement the activities that we've identified, and working with our UNECE partners to make some connections further across UNECE member states. We don't know everybody and what everyone's doing, and we'd love to be able to connect with more folks to see what innovative approaches or different approaches and best practices we could tap into, highlight, and to share across the UNECE region. We are also interested in and will be hosting and also supporting events that are happening internationally, both to promote the Charter and to connect with people that are potentially partners and collaborators around this work on youth homelessness and prevention, and also doing things like developing training and technical assistance. So one example is currently this week, there's a training session happening that's in partnership with Fianza Youth and with some support from the Council of Europe, to train a number of young practitioners in a model of practice called Housing First for Youth, which is an evidence-based practice. So this is an example of how we're working to share our knowledge across the UNECE, and we're looking for more ways to do that and partner around that. We're also going to be partnering with the American Bar Association on their global survey of legal services for homeless youth, and Melanie will speak to that in a moment. And also building toward, we would love to work with our friends and partners here at UNECE and the committee members to potentially build towards some kind of a declaration regarding youth homelessness and prevention. So I'll pause there and then pass it on to Melanie to talk about some of the immediate activities that we will have ongoing.
And I just want to thank Dr. Gates and York University, because our Charter Centre truly is a partnership between the university and civil society, and that's where my work with The Way Home comes in. As a partnership Charter Centre, we were talking about a project with the American Bar Association that we've just launched, and we invite UNECE member states to please pass this along to your network. We're working with the American Bar Association to map existing legal services for young people experiencing homelessness so that we can identify promising models and support the replication of those models. Another partner on the project is the international law firm Baker McKenzie. And so these are the kinds of projects we have underway. In terms of some of the projects we highlighted yesterday that we'll be working on in partnership with the UNECE, develop guidelines for preventing and responding to homelessness in UNECE member states, monitor the progress of member states' strategies to prevent and end homelessness where they exist and promote the development of those strategies where they do not, and highlight effective cross-systems responses to preventing and ending youth homelessness. Again, we're very honored to be part of this network of charter centers, and we look forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very promising, the work that you are going to do, and we look forward to to see the results of your work. I don't know if you have been working, because you mentioned the Council of Europe, and I don't know if you have been working with FEANSA. Yeah, good, because somehow I feel obliged for not having, for not being able to produce something visible for them. So it will be a big help also for us to, in front of them. So now I give the floor to Mr. Alberto. I didn't spell right your family name, Sidonia, from the Norman Foster Foundation.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the invitation to everyone. It's an honor to be here representing the Norman Foster Foundation and seeing actually everyone face to face after so many Zoom meetings with centers of excellence and the other work we're doing with UNECE. So very quickly, we're obviously working in the realm of architecture, design, and technology. And our bigger aim is actually to help new generations of architects and even the world really see what these disciplines can actually do in terms of social environmental projects and new disciplines that are changing the world. So to illustrate this, these are actually a few sketches from our president, Norman Foster, who was here at San Marino yesterday and the day before. And obviously our aim is to get together all the relevant actors in a specific topic that we're working with, obviously to analyze how those topics can be improved, and then to actually design specific solutions to solve those problems. So these are, for example, the illustrations that Norman did for the 2030 Regional Action Plan for UNECE. And for that, we are actually structured in 3 different units: the archive, the education, and the architecture unit, which I'm a part of. And obviously the archive has the privilege of having the entire work from Norman Foster in his career, and we're actually building upon the vast experience. The educational unit is probably the most relevant for this forum, which is obviously creating these capacity building workshops and all the different thematic events that are shared with some colleagues at UNECE as well. And our unit actually takes this knowledge into real world projects to solve problems that we're seeing. So this is a picture of one of the events we usually have, which is the workshops. We usually gather 10 students from across the world, graduate students that are the best in their field or some of the best, and we bring them to our headquarters in Madrid, which is where we're based, and we mix them with 10 professors or 10 experts in each of the fields that those workshops are part of. So to very quickly go over the activities, especially in this educational realm that we have been developing over the last year. We had last October a sustainability workshop along with the public debates on some of the relevant topics like rematerializing housing, energy, and for those of the students and members that cannot come to Madrid, obviously we do have a strong digital presence of having Zoom interviews and conversations between Norman and the rest of the experts that we also invite. And obviously a lot of publications are made, especially focusing on cities and urban problems, which is, as architects, our kind of field of expertise. And obviously we do have these kinds of debates in the foundation. This is the foundation's library spaces, where the students and professionals are actually engaging in conversation on the topics that we are discussing over a roundtable. And we usually try, obviously we're headquartered in Madrid, so we try to permeate this knowledge to the city. So this is a picture of one of the 4 debates we had last year on very close to the foundation in a venue to actually speak about these topics. There is another work we're very proud to be part of. We have Olga from the city of Kharkiv here. We have been helping out them to rebuild Kharkiv with a new master plan, which we'll be talking about more tomorrow. And we were very happy actually to have them in our headquarters past June to actually discuss with Norman and the wider team what are their strategies really for the city in this terrible situation that they are living, and see how can we actually help. So for next year, apart obviously from this great work and very terrible thing that we're doing, very great thing for this terrible event that we're doing in Kharkiv, we will promote this educational workshops, hopefully in much more collaboration with the rest of the UNECE Center of Excellence network, again on city, sustainability, and moving on to more publications on the influence of architecture and technology. and a series of conversations and masterclass series as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto, for informing us on the activities that your foundation has undertaken, and highlighting also the need for capacity building and training for young professionals, which, as I mentioned this morning, is critical, especially in this process or period of transition into technological use and smart city development. And I also wish that you will be continuing your work and collaboration with our committee and other centers of excellence. Now I give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hedjadzi, Center of Excellence. Oh, sorry, so it's Matteo Tarantino.
Same place.
Yeah, but... Yeah, he apologized. He couldn't attend.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, indeed, I extend the salutations of my colleague Alexander Hedjadzi, who is the director of the Geneva Center of Excellence. So our Center of Excellence in Geneva is mostly focused on research. Our main areas of research are basically two. One regards urban data, a topic that has been touched upon many times throughout this session, which we are very, very happy. In particular, studying how to improve the efficiency of urban data collection, management, and dissemination. More on that in a moment. And we also have an original research direction on what we call data culture, so understanding the human side of data, the people who actually have to work with a computer and produce and manage the data that we all want to feed our visions for the future of cities. Our second body of research focuses on how to provide a concrete form to these visions. So we mostly work on nature-based solutions, and we work on the factors that can accelerate the speed of implementation of urban sustainability agendas. I will spend a few moments talking to you about some specific projects we are running. One is called Red Hope. It's a project that brings together a network of universities and studies housing data management. Again, a topic that was already very fruitfully discussed today. This project is aimed at building an online tool to help housing institutions understand where there are critical problems in their data pipelines and help them find solutions or at least point these systems into the right direction. This tool is currently in prototyping form and is undergoing final revisions. The second project that we are bringing on is visualization for KPIs improvement. What do we mean as that? On the one hand, we are trying to develop tools that are easy and inexpensive to help institutions, including UNECE itself, to visualize some of the KPIs of smart and sustainable cities. On the other hand, however, we are also using these tools to stress test this kind of data. And what we realize is that sometimes visualization is an excellent tool to show where there are criticalities in the data. For example, in stress testing some of the indicators for smart and sustainable cities, by visualizing them in different ways, some of them are in the picture right here, we realize that there may be a need to improve some elements, specifically reference values and some of the baselines, thus contributing more in general to the way this data is collected and managed, and ultimately on how accurate and fruitful city profiles based on this data can be. And finally, the final deliverable of this project is we are studying how to design, again, and implement inexpensive and easy-to-use tools for cities to help them collect this KPI in some sort of unified form. Then what we do is education and training. Here we have one flagship project, which is an open access online e-learning platform called cityresiliencetraining.com, which is free for you, free to use and free to access. And we helped UNECE develop 3 courses on this online platform. One on the formalization of informal constructions, another one on the recovery action plan for informal settlements after post-COVID-19 recovery action plan, and the third one on voluntary local reviews. But since the platform is now online and open, we also partner with other institutions such as UN Habitat to build a course on urban economic resilience. And finally, we also organize and contribute to, as a Center of Excellence, to in-person training programs in Geneva, particularly aimed at professionals and policymakers. And finally, and I'll be very brief on this, what we do is a lot of dissemination. Our close geographical proximity with the UN in Geneva helps us makes it easy for us to take part into the activities there. So we use the conferences and sessions as a way to disseminate some of the things that we are doing. Thank you very much, and I hope that the center will be able to establish many fruitful partnerships with the other centers of excellence and also with the countries and cities that are here represented today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matteo. Very interesting work you are doing regarding focus on data, and which is one of the biggest challenges that I don't think that there is one country that doesn't suffer from analyzing, so finding, collecting, analyzing data. So this is very important, and I also wish that you extend your project with other center of excellence, but also with countries and with interested parties that are part of this committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now, I give the floor to Mr. Michele Lertora. Mr. Michele?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I extend also my greetings from the director of our center, Ms. Anna Gervasoni, that unfortunately couldn't be here. I represent the Center of Excellence on Sustainable Finance for Infrastructure and Smart Cities, based at LIUC Università Carlo Cattaneo, a private university in Lombardy, in Italy. We set up as a center roughly 1 year and a half ago. And also on our side, we are basically researchers. So we mainly perform research on topics related to finance, sustainable and green finance to fund infrastructure, sustainable and resilient infrastructure and smart cities. Our main goal has been over the last year basically to work and collect data on the role of private equity infrastructure fund, active mainly so far in the European market, and their role to develop sustainable transition regarding SDGs. We already published 2 research and working papers about the role of private equity as well as venture capital in this transition, and a book on public-private partnership as a mechanism to combine public and private finance, and the role of private capital, namely as I said before, infrastructure funds to support this transition. We also collaborated with UNECE to realize the sustainable city profile of San Marino. And beyond, I would say, the main focus of our center, which is research, we also try to disseminate our results, hosting some international conferences, hybrid mainly, about sustainable mobility, as well as waste management and circular economy, always trying to invite and let speak professionals and practitioners from the finance industry to understand their role in supporting this kind of activities. And we also try to participate in our country, in Italy, to events such as, for example, Connext, hosted by Confindustria, the Italian main association of firms. In this very moment, we are going forward on our research and analysis on the role of infrastructure funds in PPP. So if there are some specific characteristics that allow infrastructure fund to carry out this kind of investment, as well as, of course, handling and improving in terms of material our website, which is, of course, freely accessible to all of you, and include all the publication I mentioned before, and further event of dissemination, which I hope will be jointly together over the next month. Of course, our goal for the following next month is to deepen this work and to work closely with the Secretariat for Green Finance, specifically related also to infrastructure and real estate buildings for smart cities and other activities of dissemination. I thank you all for your attention and again for the opportunity of being here.
Thank you, Michele, for also for sharing with us the activities of your Center of Excellence and the plans for the future. Also very interesting topics related to smart cities and to financing, which is one of the critical issue, I would say, also together with data. Now I invite Hannah to brief the committee about the activities of the Centers of Excellence that couldn't be present here today.
Thank you so much, Doris. Well, I will start first with Glasgow. They sent us 2 slides, the Center of Excellence for Glasgow, in Glasgow. Yes, okay. Thank you so much. The Center of Excellence, I don't know if it's working. Yes, it is. Thank you. No, I'm okay. The Center of Excellence of Glasgow is very much focused on having a holistic, integrated treatment of SDGs. If Brian was here, Brian Evans, he's the main expert from that center working with us. He would just insist on me saying integrated, indivisible treatment of the SDGs. So the way the treatment, the center explicitly tries to do, be it in terms of analysis or in terms of report, they insist that the analysis should be very comprehensive. Of course, in terms of what the center has done with us, they are basically reflected on the chart, on the slide. One thing to say is that Brian Evans was a key author, the author for the Regional Action Plan. The Center of Excellence for Norman Foster Foundation, they provided the sketches, but he was the one who provided the table with the action plan. We wanted to have them shipped from Geneva, but unfortunately they just got stuck in the way. But the action plan is available on our website, and there is a small paper where we kept outside with the hyperlinks to all our publications, and this is one of them. Another key publication that they did is the work with partnership network for collaboration on RAP. Yes, then he also collaborated in disseminating information on RAP, and there are a lot of training activities because the Regional Action Plan focuses on many areas: housing, safe building, and safe city planning, urban planning. So there are lots of policy elements, and he also contributes to all the workshops and discussions related to that. The next Center of Excellence, they also sent me 2 slides, which is from Estonia. So I'll wait until they upload the slides. Yes, and it's the Estonian Union of Cooperative Housing Association. Okay, this is a very specific center of excellence in that it's highly focused on supporting homeowner associations. So basically they have a network, and they have around 1,400 members in between apartment associations, and they help them with all the legal aspects in terms of training. So they train them in all the aspects related to housing for the negotiations of the homeowners. In terms of activities, you could see they're listed on this slide. I hope you can see. Is it clear? Oh, yes, yes. So first of all, they help in the area of, they have launched, the local energy poverty alleviation office. It's very recent, in 2022 January, in order to empower and help the associations, the homeowner associations. The office, of course, is a focal point for helping all the citizens across the country. Of course, they are very generous in sharing their experience with us, be it through capacity building or training activities. The president from the center was not able to join us today for personal unforeseen reasons, and he's very sorry. We have also the Center of Excellence from Tirana. Of course, they were not able to join us, but they had a very successful workshop, and I think you were witnessing that workshop, Doris, not me. So they did it in collaboration with the Foster Foundation, and I leave the floor to you to explain.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. In fact, I'm not talking on behalf of the Center of Excellence, but I'm just referring to the last activity that we did together with the Center of Excellence, with UNECE, UN Habitat, UN Albania, and also Center of Excellence of Madrid, the foundation of Norman Foster. It was about, I mentioned it already, Smart Sustainable City. Within the Smart Sustainable City workshop that we did with the students, we had also some side events on emergency architecture, on Kharkiv, that was mainly organized by UNECE and City of Kharkiv, on the planning and the needs that City of Kharkiv has for developing the plan and for redeveloping after the peace will be established. And another workshop that we did on SDGs and local reviews, so local reviews. So it was interesting noting that, as I mentioned, it is not very much, when we speak about smart city, we don't get very much the connection with the urban planning. So we thought that we need to extend further the curricula for the students to introduce smart city and smart and sustainable city into the planning as a tool. And I hope that we can generate more activities on that. I already had a spoke with Marta that was here, and they have also developed a curricula for smart sustainable city, and I hope also with the Norman Foster Foundation we can still continue working on that, not only for universities in Tirana, in Albania, but also for the region of Balkans. So we want to extend our knowledge and sharing of experiences with other countries of the Balkan region. So this is more or less what we got from that, and we also use that as a potential, and Gulnara was there, for knowing or having a contact with all the potential donors and institutions that can support the Agenda 2030, the urban agenda. Thank you. Now, we have some time if there are questions and comments. Sorry. Now I give the floor to and invite Mr. Lorenzo Schilgrin-Grandi, Director of City Diplomacy Lab, France.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
So you will make a kind of complex and put it all together.
But the fact is that it might seem that I snuck in fact, in this panel as I'm the only not center of excellence, but hopefully in the process of becoming one. And so I would like to thank the Secretariat and Madam Chair for this opportunity to share with you my experience. So the City Diplomacy Lab, located at Columbia Global Center, Paris, that subscribes the rationale of the UNECE Center of Excellences and even more so the Geneva UN Charter's principles. This is because the lab's creation and methodology addresses the need to reconcile the theory and practice for sustainable urban development. And this positioning, in fact, is based on the fact, on the observation, and I can say this because I am an academic, that too often universities, they resemble to ivory towers. Fortunately, not the universities that are represented here today, but the vast majority of them. And, well, I know. The process of becoming has been stopped. No, but, well, I have a little academic experience, and I have to say that there is this self-referential logic that the value of universities basically based only on dialogue with other scholars. So, the famous publish or perish. There is no coincidence that the City Diplomacy Lab was born within Columbia University in the city of New York. So this is not only a matter of quality of teaching, research, and events, but it is linked to two unique features of this university. First of all, this university has explicitly identified civic engagement as a priority. It's a purpose for the university. And this means playing an active role in society. In the US, of course, but across the world as well, because the university has a network of 9 global centers scattered across the world. So there is one where I am located physically, the Global Center in Paris for Europe, and then we have Istanbul, Amman, Tunis, Nairobi, Mumbai, Beijing, Santiago, and Rio de Janeiro. This allows us to develop an engagement in all the regions of the world. How this applies to the topics that we are discussing, the topics at the center of the Geneva UN Charter. Well, as mentioned this morning, academic research has showed that cities' ability to create international partnership, which is city diplomacy, greatly benefits residents and communities, especially when this is done with a participatory approach. The creation of the Forum of Mayors and the VLR's guidelines demonstrate that UNECE is fully aware of that. And UNECE is in good company, together with so many other UN entities and international organizations. However, this capacity, although expanding, remains, in fact, foreclosed to most cities. I mentioned this this morning. So most of small and intermediary cities have so much to give, both in terms of bilateral and multilateral relationship, but unfortunately, they are not doing so because they have not the means, they are not able to do so. And there is a risk that city diplomacy exacerbates the territorial cleavages both within and between countries. And this is where the City Diplomacy Lab comes in. And the key words here is truly capacity building, that I know it's a recurring topic in this Congress. So the lab was created last year in September 2021 at the Columbia Center in Paris, but with the goal of working across the network of global centers of Columbia. So the goal is to spread the practice and understanding of city diplomacy, understood as a virtuous link between local and global. And we have a very peculiar staff that I have the honor of directing, which is composed of both scholars and practitioners of city diplomacy. As a result, we do applied research to support an informed choice by local leaders and support international organizations and international city networks. We organize events, both virtual and in presence, to raise awareness about the potential of city diplomacy. And finally, last but not least, education, both for our students within Columbia and for professionals. And this is what I would like to present to you. We have developed, in fact, 18 courses that cover virtually all a city does, intended as capacity building activities for municipal officers. This goes from food policies to creative cities, from sustainable housing to water and sanitation management. It covers basically everything a city does. And our understanding that is we empower the municipal officers, the permanent staff that are in charge of designing and managing those policies. In fact, we can achieve the principles of the Geneva UN charters, both in terms of environment, social, economic, and cultural sustainable development. Moreover, in the long term, we are aiming at creating a community of practice of alumni. And this international community of practice is ready, it's meant to be ready to act and collaborate on joint priorities together with the other centers of excellence and UNECE. This is basically a move to support what has been since decades the goal of city diplomacy, the advocacy goal, so multilateralism as well as regional integration. We have developed this course through a pilot project that took place last spring in Tunis. It was it saw the participation of 2 cohorts of 16 French-speaking African cities, a project that we have done in partnership with the International Association of Francophone Mayors. And we are now developing a program in full Africa with both the Tunis and the Nairobi Center. We have a program for the MENA region with the Tunis and the Amman centers, and we look forward developing together with UNECE the program for both continental Europe and the US, respectively in Paris and in New York City. So I look forward to pursue these goals with UNECE and the other centers of excellence. I took many notes, and you will certainly see an email coming from me. And well, I look forward to collaborate with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorenzo. And we also look forward to cooperate with you, as it was mentioned all these days. City diplomacy has become the key word, and to this aim also our Forum of Mayors exists and will continue. So thank you for all the information that you shared and for making possible to connect also US cities with European cities. Now, do we have some 4 o'clock. Yeah, we have some minutes now for questions and comments. So Georgia, ask the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for this amazing information you just provided to us, for all the guests and panelists. I have a question with Alberto from Norman Foster Foundation. The work you are doing is really amazing, especially about the Kharkiv, because people really need that kind of help in Ukraine. My question is, at this moment, as a representative of the head of the Agency of Spatial and Urban Planning of Georgia, we have 14 urban master planning projects at this moment on the table, and I think some of them still will be added. So in total, from 15 to 20, we're going to have this amount of master planning projects within the next 2 years. How it's possible to kind of cooperate with the Norman Foster Foundation, and how is it done to choose the projects from your side? It will be very interesting to hear some about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Well, we can definitely follow up the conversation later on, maybe more in private, but to give you a bit of context, the project of Kharkiv was actually really simple. Norman Foster heads out the Forum of Mayors of UNECE, and back in April, the mayor approached Norman asking for help to create the new master plan for Kharkiv. And obviously that started a huge process of collaboration between both institutions. I mean, at the moment, obviously, it's a work that everyone is donating their time and their resources to do because of the need. We have many collaborations with institutions, with universities, with companies in the educational unit, in the architecture unit. We have done other master planning jobs as well in India, very focused in informal settlement. So there's a huge degree of projects that we can comment. I would say that it's good that you have 14 or 15 or 20 master plans, because, you know, it's obviously great, and this is something that the UN and everyone always are stressing, which is have a plan to know what you want to do regarding cities and reconstruction. So, and Norman Foster was actually expressing this on the General Assembly back in New York, which is the practice of a master plan is actually quite essential because it brings on architects, urbanists, economists, policymakers, citizens to actually gather together and decide the future of a city. And as we're seeing, cities are increasingly the important cornerstones of sustainable development, of homelessness, of housing, of anything you can name. It's about cities because that's where people are. Obviously, those have to be coordinated with the regions. So very happy to speak about what Georgia is doing after the conversation maybe, and seeking out partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment, question or comment?
Switzerland.
Yes, Switzerland.
I have a question for the Center of Research on Homelessness. And it concerns probably a bit more your last presentation you had yesterday or the day before that, when there wasn't time for discussion. And you said that, well, once people are homeless, it's very hard to do something about it, which is why prevention is needed. And I asked myself whether you already have an idea on how you can do this prevention, because it sounds quite hard, right?
Because he was trying to be so inclusive that we're all a mess up there. Darn him.
I'm not homeless, but I couldn't find a chair. No, actually, the focus of our collaborative work is around that exact question of what do we know about effective policy and intervention responses that focus on prevention. And we're doing research now, are making the Shift project. We're funding 39 different research projects in Canada on homelessness prevention, plus demonstration projects where we actually take interventions, prototype them, pilot them, test them in the field, and do outcomes research. So we've developed a fair bit of knowledge. There's lots of great examples in Europe. In fact, the country that I think that leads around preventing homelessness is Wales. believe it or not. Wales. And they, yeah, no, well, in England, they tried to adapt it, but.
Finland.
Oh, Finland's definitely good, but on the prevention, Wales has been the real innovator. In fact, their approach called Duty to Assist, I think, is the biggest development in how to respond to homelessness since Housing First over 20 years ago. And how it works is that through legislation, local authorities are required, in cases where they're aware that somebody is at risk of homelessness or is experiencing it, they're required to offer assistance within 14 days. If the person and the family accept the help, they're required to remedy the situation within 56 days. I'm not sure why 56, but anyway. And that remedy cannot be putting someone in a homeless shelter. It means a housing-led solution. And they've seen their numbers of people entering homelessness just go down, right? So there's research behind it. So these are the kind of things we're interested in, like who are doing these great things. Finland is the leader around Housing First and housing. Denmark is doing great work as well. So we're interested in that, and then we're also working on developing our own ideas that we're sharing as well.
Thank you. Any other question or comment? Yes, Uzbekistan.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question to the Norman Foster Foundation. My country is going to develop about 1,020 master plans for the 2 years, and now it's a big challenge for us, but we still have the presidential decree for doing this. And in my country, there is a huge lack of the competencies and not enough professionals. And I'm really curious about your educational programs of your foundation. Is there any possibility for cooperation with your foundation and our country in this educational sphere? Thank you.
Thank you for your question as well, and it's great to know that there are so many master plans in the room, obviously. As you're very well pointing out, obviously, the key is to have the capacities in each country for those master plans to be actually good master plans and not impeding master plans, because enough times the master plans are actually too rigid and they're not really flexible to the realities of each cities, and therefore what's supposed to be a great document and a great actually initiative and a set of regulations to move a city forward end up being something that's actually stopping the city from creating really good housing, really good buildings, really good transport corridors. And for that, obviously, you know, international best practices, capacity building, everything we have all spoken about is crucial. At the current level, the workshops we do create in the educational level are focused on young professionals, but we are seeing increasingly the need, and we were speaking with the future Center of Excellence from Colombia as well in the morning, that you know, actually having capacity building to the city officials in each of the countries and cities is essential. And not just the mayors, but also actually going down to the practitioners, the architects, the urban planners, the policymakers. So we will definitely be focusing on that in the coming months and probably years. So again, it would be great to speak about specific collaborations after this, if that's okay. So thank you for your question.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Someone? Any other question or proposal? I don't see any. So in that regard, I read the following. Can you put the decision on the screen? The committee welcomes the activities of Geneva UN Charters of Excellence, which support the committee in the implementation of the Geneva UN Charter on Sustainable Housing, reiterates the role of the Centers of Excellence in the implementation of the programs of work of the Housing and Land Management component of the Housing, Land Management and Population Sub-Program, invites the Centers of Excellence to continue their activities in accordance with the Secretariat in line with the guidance contained in document EC/HBP/2016/2 and other relevant guidance on the matter. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, but we had to...
Now we continue with the agenda item 16, activities of the Real Estate Market Advisory Group. The relevant documents are several in this agenda item, is EC/HBP/2020/9/5, 22/5, 22/7/8, and I inform you that the mandate of and the terms of reference of the Real Estate Market Advisory Group were extended until end of 2022 pursuant to the EC Executive Committee decision, which is contained in the document EC/X 2020/L.15 of December 2020. The Bureau of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management discussed the activities of the advisory group and recommended the extension of its mandate until end of 2024. The revised terms of reference are provided in document EC/HBP/2022/7. REM Advisory Group also developed a draft program of work for the period 23-24, and this draft was discussed by the Bureau of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management. The draft program of work is provided in document /8. And now I invite Ms. Paloma Taltabul de La Paz, which is the chair of the Real Estate Market Advisory Group, and she is also professor, but I already introduced her. Professor, Departamento de Análisis Económico Aplicado, Universidad de Alicante, Spain, to present the draft terms of reference and program of work. Ms. Caroline Grimsley, Vice Chair of REM and George Mason School of Business, United States, to present activities by REM, and Mr. Donovan Ripkema, member of REM, President, Heritage Strategies International, United States, to present activities by REM. So, Paloma, you have already taken the floor.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. Well, let me present our report about the activities we did during the last period and the activities we are planned. Is it okay? Here, thank you. During the next period. So just introduce ourselves, Real Estate Market Advisory Group, support the committee and the Working Party on Land Administration in the implementation of the program of work. This is our mandate. To do this and assist the committee and the Working Party on Land Administration to develop a stronger and more sustainable housing real estate market and more sustainable cities. The advisory groups report to both bodies. So our group is formed by 22 members plus one. One is very recent, join us, and we come from 17 different countries with different experiences in our areas. Our thematic priorities are affordable and adequate and healthy housing and real estate, sharing economy and housing market, housing finance, climate neutral and energy efficiency building and cities, refurbishing, retrofitting and decarbonizing housing stock, property valuation, fire safety, smart, circular and sustainable cities, land market and land administration, and urban planning design. You can see here like a structure of the different specialization, different background our members has. As you see, we cover property management, land management, and register. You can see the names of the experts of REM experts there. Sustainable development, fire safety, heritage property, real estate market analysis, design, construction, and energy efficiency, property valuation, housing policy, housing affordability, finance, land administration, and sustainable cities. They are not all areas in real estate, but most of them. Our program of activities during the previous period was organized international workshop and side events, prepare studies and the above mentioned thematic priorities, support the dissemination of information by using the different presentation at the international level, meetings and preparation of articles, for journals and mass media, participate in the committee's activities on energy efficiency and affordable housing, and provide inputs into the committee's activities on smart sustainable cities. Our previous program of activities has been fulfilled, and let me show you what we did. So in the first group, studies and guidelines publication, we collaborate with guidelines and tools and mechanisms to finance sustainable cities and compendium of practices on innovative finance. Is Raúl García, one of our members, who were very active on this. In Housing 2030, Kat Grimsley in the table was participating, sharing economy. I was coordinating the analysis. The study is not yet published, but well, it's published online, but not in paper yet. Our activities about consultancy and committee participation, we collaborate with the final works in Housing 2030 final works during the writing and the providing case studies and energy efficiency workshops. We also collaborate with smart and sustainable cities, taking part of different thematic groups, and a joint task force on energy standard in buildings. My colleague Irena there was very active here. And we also provide short documents helping and supporting other posterior works in Ukrainian war, green finance, and in housing affordability. We were also active in seminars in two areas. We organized a couple of seminars online, one about safety and security in the home, and second about technology, how to apply the new technology for urban planning, the case of cyberurban. People that organized the first one was Gary, Brian, and Bill, and in the second was organized by Nuria Raga, also here. And in person, we were active, organizing seminars and presenting, taking part of panels in the huge conference in May in Madrid. We organized a side event that was very, very well attended about sources of lack of housing affordability and evidence from different countries. We present the evidence of 5 countries in Europe from different RIN teams. And I participated in the plenary panel about ownership and tenure in the housing, affordable housing activation conference. We also organized a panel in a World Urban Forum in Katowice last June. The panel was Socioeconomic Challenges to Make Smart Cities More Sustainable. Also, it was very well attended, and you can see our members that were there in person. We also present the sharing economy report in the European Network of Housing Research, which is academic research, very well known in Europe. It was at the end of August, and we will organize the panel tomorrow. The proposed activities for 2023 are ordered around similar type of activities. So, first of all, organize international workshops and side events associated to the activities of the UNECE main priorities, prepare studies under the thematic that we are being asking to work on, a dissemination about the committee and working party activities. We will participate in the committee's activities as well, and we'll follow providing inputs to the committee activity in those areas that we are required. For next 2 years, the terms of reference contained in the document cover similar topics, because they are the more relevant topics. Is part of our background: affordable and adequate healthy housing and real estate, housing finance, climate neutral and energy efficient buildings and cities, management for multi-apartment buildings, property valuation, fire safety, smart, circular and sustainable cities, land market and land administration, and urban planning and design. So our tasks are quite similar tasks that provide evidence of to overcome the challenge addressed by the committee, prepare guidelines, recommend activities to implement and follow, assist the committee and WEPLA to undertake studies and advisory missions, work with the committee and the WEPLA to assist countries with training and capacity buildings for stakeholders involved in the housing market, collect samples and good practice in housing, assist the committee, and propose activities. We are a couple of activities we will propose and hope is of interest to the committee. So the outputs we will provide is guidance and assessment for required topics, and the formats. This guidance and assessment will have 3 in written documents about policy briefs, best practices, and short documents and recommendations. I was being required, and this is why my colleagues are here with me today, to give you like an example of what type of things we do. And I've chosen the sharing economy project. We finished the first part a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago. And I want to show you some. We continue the analysis when we start one of our projects here, and I want to share with you some very new results. So it's, just for remember a bit, it was a project that undertakes the relevance of sharing economy on housing market, especially on its effects on cities and housing affordability in rental and property markets. Well, sharing economy in housing wasn't well known. There's a lot of research about that, but what we did was to take as much as evidence as possible, and we collect information for 43 cities across Europe, the available one, and we extract all the information, millions of observations, so we create the data set, and try to identify, first of all, the economic implications for the cities. Second, regulation. We try to collect the regulation on rental market. When we started, the regulation were very few, but now the regulation is increasing. So cities are increasing regulating this market, and to approach potential effects for residents. One of the output of this analysis was to see in data, the mobility of population. This is a hidden information, it's new, and we could calculate how much people, the amount of people in terms of the local residents, arrive to the house only using this channel. So the data available at that moment finished in 2019. We have expanded to 2021, and just for you to see the analysis we did by city. These are examples of the city. So in these figures, you can see in blue lines are the number of units used for sharing economy, sharing rental market, so short-term rental market. And I divided into one availables, the number of uses of housing that are available, so non-booked, and those are booked by city. And I also try to check the visible effect of the COVID-19. So the shade area is that starting March of 2020, and we can see the evolution after the COVID-19 in every city. And well, one of the things is, first of all, the relevance of the movements, how 2017, between 2017 and 2018, the number of rental units, short-term rental units, just grows a lot. The top was at the end of 19, and in 2020 it started to diminish. In most of the cities, but in other cities, it's not diminished, it still is growing. You can see here Bologna, Bordeaux, Brazil, Berlin, Bristol, Copenhagen. We have the 43 cities. If you are interested, we can provide the detailed data. We also check Lyon, Madrid, they are all. We also check the prices. And this adds, for instance, the evolution of the prices in Milan. And we can see another result, which is also surprised. In many cities, the prices practically don't change. The trend was similar with periods with peaks. This is Milan, this is Geneva. And after the COVID-19, the prices stay well, in the same level, and in some places reduce, in some places rise. Look at this. This is London, and this is Oslo. Look at the effect in Oslo. Was a huge effect of the COVID impacting this market, but immediately recover. And this was Amsterdam and Athens, and this is Barcelona and Vienna. So we have all the evolution, trying to find a common pattern or the different patterns by city, but this type of results confirm us that the reaction in this market of every city is different depending on each city. That is my presentation. Thanks for your attention, and I'm quite open for any of your questions.
Thank you, Paloma. A very intensive activity you have, and very fruitful, I would say, very interesting, with a lot of insight and food for thought for our committee, for taking from your research and activities that you do and to bring to our attention. And the last one that you shared is very interesting because it's also a very controversial topic, the use of share economy in housing, so in rental housing. Now I give the floor to Caroline Grimsley. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I actually go by Kat. I'm Dr. Kat Grimsley, but thank you. Yes, also Carolyn. I'm here from George Mason University. I'm proud to be vice chair of the Real Estate Market Advisory Group, supporting Paloma and Hannah and everyone here, the member states and the Bureau. I appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. We're in a beautiful, beautiful host country. We're in a beautiful room. We have water. We're going to go enjoy some wine, wonderful weather. You've got your phones, computers. We were able to afford to fly here, and not everyone can. And I think that's the reason so many folks have come together and why you're all still here even for this late afternoon session, because we're really trying to solve a very real problem. And I think one of our colleagues, I believe from Poland, was mentioning the other day on one of the panels, this all sometimes feels very abstract. I'm here to talk about the Housing 2030 report, which we've all seen and heard. It's been talked about many, many times, I think, at this conference and at previous conferences. And it also still seems abstract. It's a great resource, a phenomenal resource. And it brings together so many people and so much wisdom. But it's just a piece of paper until you're here, sitting here listening, trying to think through what you can do for your voters, for your citizens, for the folks who aren't able to come and enjoy a wonderful conference in San Marino. So a lot has been said about this report, and I don't want to repeat what you may already have heard. So I'll try to give you some new insights, but of course I need to give credit to the drafting team. This was a Herculean effort. It was under Dr. Julie Lawson, who really pulled everything together. There were 50 countries involved, at least 100 experts, 1,000 workshop participants. So it's phenomenal how many people care about this topic and how many people came together. It's a truly remarkable collection of examples. But again, everyone here, what I'm hoping you will do is actually go through it when you have time and maybe come up with something new. So as many examples as are in here doesn't represent all the human ingenuity that's out there. There's some fantastic things that could be taken and used in Georgia or Uzbekistan, some of the colleagues I've been fortunate enough to meet on this trip. There can be some wonderful inspiration that comes from this and create something new to help us sort of with our collective challenge that we're facing. So, quick background, again, I think folks already know this. The opening of this report talks about 1 million people. 1 million people in the UNECE region who are low and mid-income housing, who are housing burdened. And then you throw in energy poverty, right? You throw in all of these topics that we're all struggling with for our citizens, for our voters, for our neighbors. And you see why these groups came together to promote this and really try to make it happen and bring this wisdom together. And so the time is right. There are a lot of other documents out there, the SDGs, the Geneva Charter on Sustainable Housing, but we also have ESG Investing now, right? Folks maybe have heard of that. That's environmental, social, and governance-based investing, where people, private citizens, investors, corporations are finally tracking and reporting on these types of things. So it's a new resource to harness investment and corporations to a thing that the public sector and all of the dedicated public servants have been working towards. So the time is right for this, which is really exciting. And my key takeaways, I do have some slides on each of the chapters, but again, I think everyone's heard that. So my key takeaways, again, trying to bring this out of the abstract. Everything in here is a tool, and there's so many resources, but none of it can be implemented without you folks here taking it back and finding a way to overcome what I think are the following 4 things: resources, capacity, political will, and a holistic thinking. So again, great tools in here, absolutely fantastic tools. If you don't focus on capacity building, you won't be able to implement them. If you don't have the funding and the availability, for example, in your tax budget to make cuts, you can't offer tax incentives. So we have some preconditions before we can unlock these tools. And in particular, I want to challenge everyone to sort of expand your thinking just a teeny bit more beyond affordable housing. The housing system is clearly very important and very complicated, but I mentioned holistic thinking. If we have housing increases that are disproportionate with salary increases in our economy, we have a problem. We have an external factor. I see someone shaking their head, thank you. We have an external factor influencing our system. If in the US we have increasing healthcare costs, right, you have relatively less money for housing, it exacerbates the affordability problem. In Europe, if we have skyrocketing energy costs, right, there are all of these factors that come in and affect housing beyond just housing solutions. Which in no way means this is not important, and in no way means this is not a phenomenally powerful tool. It means we need to think holistically in our solutions and our governance and our quest to help our fellow neighbors. Another thing I'd like to point out that may or may not have been shared with folks as you've heard about this document, that I really respect about particularly Julie, our head project lead and the drafting team, is it's got tables and different charts with the pros and the cons of all these solutions. Because we've heard time and again, you need to make these things work for your reality, whatever the reality is in Bulgaria or Italy or wherever you may be coming from. But sometimes that means understanding that these are not all perfect solutions, and you do have to consider what the drawbacks might be in order to go forward in an intelligent way with your policies and your capacity building. So I think that's a really important element, is that this document is well-rounded and doesn't just say, oh, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z thing. Inclusionary zoning is a great example. We have that in the US, and there are battles all day long about the pros and cons of inclusionary zoning. So it's important to remember those types of things. Again, I think folks know how this is set up. We have 4 chapters. They focus on governance, land, financing, and climate challenges. I don't expect you to be able to read this slide. Again, you all have access to the document. I think I would highlight here multi-level governance and partnerships, which I know is a challenge in a lot of regions, where you want to be effective at the federal level or the state level, but you also have to empower your local municipalities and the entities and the players on that level. Also overlooked often in governance is dedicated housing providers. So that's a tool worth pulling out and looking at. And again, with governance, you need the resources, you need the capacity, you need the political will. We all know, I think, how hard it is to affect change. And again, I compliment everyone for still being here today, sitting through all of this information you've been given to try to take it back and make change. I know it's hard, and that's why this is an important tool, but we've got to focus on capacity building in order to implement some of these solutions. Land policy, I'm slightly out of order here. I think this is actually the 3rd chapter. Same thing, focus on the capacity. There's some really great solutions with public land banking, public land leasing. There's a very controversial solution in here, which is vacancy tax. I don't know if anyone has that in their jurisdictions, but you're basically, as the public sector, saying, hey, if you own a property and you're not using it, you owe tax for the lack of use. An interesting way to build revenue, but also create a disincentive for property to be out of use. Obviously controversial, because if it's privately owned and I have rights to that property, I also have the right to leave it vacant. So a perfect example of not everything in here is obvious. There's the chapter on financing and funding, ties in obviously with resources, and there's an enormous overlap in this chapter with governance. Remember, I asked everyone to think holistically. So when you think about regulating banks, that has impact on the financing and the funding sources you might have available, particularly for low-income folks who might not qualify for a mortgage if your banking laws require certain qualifications. All right, I know I'm short on time, so we're going to wrap it up, folks. And the final chapter, I think, again, very interesting right now because we have finally green financing, we have green bonds, we have all of these really interesting solutions that are starting to emerge, and we have investors who are interested in supporting them. So this helps create a resource not only for financing, but also to help make sure our housing stock is not only affordable but adequate from an environmental standpoint. And I believe Paloma will be talking tomorrow. We have a side event with this group, the REM, on energy impacts in real estate and buildings. So this is one of perhaps the most complex chapters and a perfect example of how you've got to think through all of these different effects and how they interact. I'm not necessarily going to go through these, but there have been several milestones in this project. It's been going on for a number of years at this point. You can see here all the different events that have been founded and attended and participated in over the years. And this is really my last slide. And so on this slide, I'd like to ask everyone to get involved. Remember, we started out reflecting on our colleague from Poland's comment that this is sometimes very abstract. Let's have it not be abstract, right? The report is done, but the project is not done. The work is not done. So attend an event, host an event. If you are an institution or you are a member state or a department that could host something, do that. Help make this less abstract and help make sure that this work lives on. And that's my final ask. Thank you all so much for your attendance and for being here and supporting us.
Thank you, Dr. Grapesley, for sharing with us this important document and for promoting it, and also for giving this insight of this document. And I would also say that this document is this report. It looks like a menu that you can choose between different options, and you can combine also different options in this. And I was just asked by minister to find some schemes for mortgage insurance, and I just went to the book now, and I found 3 cases that I have to read and to see, and also to check which are the pros and cons of each example that are brought in this. So it's very useful and very practical use also. Thank you. And now I give the floor to Mr. Donovan Ripkema. Housing 2030 is not in, if I understand well, it's only in English, the document.
I'm saying, will it be translated into Russian, for example, in order,
Yes.
policymakers to get acquainted with this?
Yes, you mean Housing 2030? Yes. Sorry. I mean the sharing economy, no, for example. Sorry.
It is translated. Okay, good.
Okay. Hello, all again. Thank you for being here. Earlier session, someone asked, well, exactly what does REM do? And from Paloma's presentation, you see a lot of things, and Kat's as well, that REM members are involved in a lot of different things. And one of the advantages of having a very diverse set of interest, skills, expertise all within the real estate world, allows contributions in areas we actually know what we're talking about. Prior to the plague falling on all of us in 2020, REM, UNECE through REM issued this publication called the Policy Framework for Sustainable Real Estate Markets. And it was, again, we heard about publications that REM does, writes, helps write, contributes to, and this is a particularly good one. And the reason I'm going back a couple of years is because too often, I think, these excellent publications get written and then forgotten 6 months after their distribution. And so I encourage you all to look at the website, the UNECE website, and download this one. And the framework of this report was there were 12 sets of principles, and there were a wide range of things. Green financing, the contribution of the real estate sector to an economy, property valuation, financing, wide range of things. But one of those principles is my little area of interest and expertise, and that is the heritage area. And the report is structured. There's a set of principles, then there's a rationale for having included that principle in the document, and then some criteria that should be considered. And so the principle was enhance people's quality of life on leveraging on the regeneration and renewal of public and private housing, including landscape, historical, and cultural heritage. So that was the general one of the 12 principles. The rationale was these: adaptive reuse is environmentally responsible, socially and culturally responsible, that the regeneration of public and private housing stock with cultural and heritage significance can be effective, that heritage buildings add significantly. By the way, the pictures, I've covered almost all your countries, though all that I've been in are up here someplace. Heritage buildings add significantly to the sense of place, quality of life, connection to the city. Rehabilitation of heritage buildings is a consistent element in successful urban regeneration, and heritage projects often have positive catalytic impacts beyond the project itself. So those were the rationale. And then that led to a series of criteria. Seven, meaning that was the seventh principle: landscape, historical heritage, and cultural heritage. National housing policies should consider social and territorial peculiarities and support the protection of enhancement of landscapes, historical heritage, and cultural heritage. Very consistent with Principle 2 of the San Marino Declaration of 2 days ago. Urban regeneration. Instruments such as urban regeneration procedures and land consolidation should be promoted in the renewal of public and private housing, including landscapes, historical, and cultural heritage. Again, the point that's been made several times is that we can start addressing housing issues with something other than building high towers at the edge of cities. We ought to think about reusing the resources that we have. The criteria 3, protection and conservation of World Heritage properties. Cultural and natural heritage is among priceless and irreplaceable assets, not only of each nation, but of humanity as a whole. The loss through deterioration or disappearance of any of these most prized assets constitutes an impoverishment of the heritage of all of the peoples of the world. Moreover, the protection and conservation of the natural and cultural heritage are a significant contribution to sustainable development. 7.4, this is Tbilisi, by the way, if you haven't gone there. Legislation that a national policy on administration and maintenance of buildings. Again, we've heard several times on panels about the importance of maintaining the buildings that we have if we're going to provide safe, sustainable housing. Legislation that strengthens the real estate sector and ensures efficient administration, operation, and maintenance of buildings, and lands should be a key element of national policy. And then the last one that really is important, because too often I think we think of heritage too narrowly and think only of grand monuments where there needs to be a very kind of particular level of maintenance. But we have a lot of heritage that doesn't meet the standard of the Taj Mahal, and we need to think about, we need to be flexible in terms of the response to that. And so this criteria was national policies and programs that encourage, when possible and appropriate, dwellers of informal construction to regularize and upgrade their constructions, provided that the geographic location and other factors allow minimum safety requirements to be met. So we're not saying make places unsafe. We need to make them safe, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to import masons from Italy to work on every one of our heritage buildings. It was identified that at least 4 of the SDGs were met if you would advance heritage-based policy in your community. And my final remark is that heritage buildings have an impact far beyond tourism and should be considered an essential component of comprehensive sustainable development efforts. Thanks very much.
Thank you for reminding us for important publications that UNECE, our committee, has published, and I also invite you to visit the site of UNECE, website of UNECE, because it has a rich, very rich site with publications done in different times, but they are some of them they are still relevant. Not to mention the last publication that has been issued with regard to all the areas that are covered by our committee: housing, land management, and urban development. Now I invite Mr. Gary Strong, member of REM, and head of International Fire Safety Standards and Secretariat, United Kingdom, to brief the committee on the implementation of the International Fire Safety Standards, and also for the participation in the work of ECE Joint Task Force on Energy Efficiency Standards in Buildings.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and distinguished country representatives and colleagues. So last but not least this afternoon, fire safety. So just to introduce myself, I'm Gary Strong. I'm the chair of the International Fire Safety Standards Coalition, which was started and launched at the UNECE in Geneva back in July 2018. It consists of over 100 organisations, professional bodies from around the world that have come together to try and improve fire safety. My background is I'm a surveyor who specialises in fire safety, and I have the unusual experience of being in a fire where my parents' house caught fire, and luckily we managed to escape before the thing burnt. So the thing I always start with is that the science of fire knows no geographical or political boundaries. A fire is a fire, right, wherever it occurs in the world. But how we deal with fire prevention and how we deal with the fire infrastructure of putting out the fire varies enormously around the world, and that's what we're hoping to address with our coalition. Just a little bit of context around this. Around about 3 million fires per annum, and this is only from those countries that collect the data. Lots of countries don't collect data on fire. 7 million injuries per annum, around 150,000 deaths, and around about 350 billion cost, we estimate, in terms of fire, around about 1 to 2% GDP of countries. So it's a huge topic. And of course, this year in 2022, we saw an enormous number of wildfires occurring. Around about 1.6 million acres has burned in Europe this year alone because of climate change and the increased temperatures, meaning lots and lots of what we call the wildland-urban interface, where fields dry out, the grass dries out. It's very, very tender, and it spreads fire enormously quickly. You can't outrun some of these fires. And we've destroyed buildings across many, many countries, including where I come from in the UK, which was just almost unheard of to some extent, the fires that encroached upon London just this summer. Our coalition is very solutions-focused, and taking something that Jean Todt said on Monday, actually, from the road safety campaign, is that we are very much focused on what actions we can deliver. You can write the best standards and the best plan, but actually what you really need to do is to drive forward the actual actions that will improve fire safety over a period of time. So this was the launch of the coalition back at the Palais des Nations in Geneva in July 2018. And we are aiming to raise standards in fire safety, bring greater consistency globally. There's lots of research going on around fire safety, but not a lot of it is well known by designers, by architects, by engineers, and by developers. And we're also focused on capacity building, in particular around professionalism of those individuals who are involved in the whole property life cycle of design, construction and management of buildings. And whilst we focus on life safety in particular in many codes that exist around the world, picking up on Donovan's point about heritage buildings, we're also focused on how to protect existing buildings as well. So if you look at this building, for example, it's got no sprinklers in it in this particular room, but in many countries you'd expect to see sprinklers. So those are the sort of things that we are trying to drive forward, the awareness of how things can improve fire safety, not only just to protect life, but also to protect the buildings as well, and set those standards. Fire safety capacity building does relate obviously to the SDGs, and quite a lot of them in particular are very, very important to fire safety, as you can see there. It also relates to the UNECE Regional Action Plan for fire safety, and particularly capacity building, which includes training, education, competence, accreditation. Those of you from the UK right now will understand the issues that we're going through around competence and accreditation, which is coming in for high-rise building. But also we recognise that fundraising is going to be necessary, particularly for helping low and middle income countries. So whilst we can lend support and point people towards the expertise, we do recognise that actually funding is going to be needed, particularly around some of the infrastructure. So which is why we've decided to launch a Decade of Action for Fire Safety 2022 to 2032. We've taken our cue very much from Jean Todt and his road safety campaign, where they've had a very successful Decade of Action for road safety, and we are now on that journey just starting this year. This also relates to the Geneva UN Charter on Sustainable Housing. Again, the same thing around capacity building. So back in this meeting, which was held in 2020, this committee endorsed the very first output of our coalition, which was the IFSS Standard Common Principles. And you can see there are 5 fairly simple principles. And we thought that was a good start in terms of driving forward fire safety. If everybody who operates in the real estate sector, in construction, adopts these principles and to raise awareness of fire safety, prevention, detection, occupant protection, containment and extinguishment. Very simple principles, which is in the document, which is up on the UNECE standards part of the website. And it was surprising how many people didn't really understand some of that before we published this document. But then we realised that actually just having the standards was not enough. What we needed to do was to drive forward the education, the training, the competence, the capacity building over a much longer period, which is why we've launched the Decade of Action. And that has an overall goal of stabilising and then reducing the forecast level of fire fatalities, injuries, economic cost and environmental impact around the world by 2032 as our global population inevitably increases and as urbanisation increases as well, with these 5 pillars. So pillar 1 is around people, pillar 2 is around products, having fire-safe products, pillar 3 is around structures, making sure the structures are safe, both for new and for existing buildings, infrastructure, that's around the firefighting infrastructure, which in many countries is quite poor, and pillar 5 is around communities. We also have 15 objectives, and you can read these. I'm not going to go through all of these in the time I've got, but you can see how there are many, many things where we think there are practical actions which we can help individual countries, regions, and mayors help with their cities in terms of improving the fire safety. If you take just one of those, for example, improving data collection. As I say, many countries don't collect data on fire safety. They don't understand how many fires there are. They don't know what caused the fires and how to improve them. And that's the thing which we have called out as being a really important, just one small important point around fire safety. You don't know what you don't know, as we often say. And then we go on about regulatory frameworks and reviewing those to increase the awareness of fire safety and improve the competence and improve the capacity. So we've now published the Decade of Action Fire Safety Plan. We are now getting on with global communications around that. There's a Decade of Action steering committee which has been set up with experts around the world, and we have the 5-pillar subgroup committees also set up as well to drive forward their individual pillars and improve what we're trying to do. So as that becomes more widely adopted and implemented across markets, we have a very broad range of specialists from across 143 countries constantly contributing to the work of the coalition. And we are going to produce an annual report, and hopefully I can come back this time next year, and report on the progress of our Decade of Action. And we do think that this will act as a positive catalyst for future actions to assist countries and build capacity around fire safety, something which we realised just after the Grenfell Tower fire, that actually fire safety had slipped down the agenda hugely. People were focusing on sustainability and energy efficiency, etc. And all of a sudden, the tragic Grenfell Tower fire really focused people on the fact you can achieve those things, but they have to be fire safe as well. So our invitation is for everyone to support what we're doing. There is an International Fire Safety Standards Coalition website. We are in the process of translating the documents as we speak into Brazilian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and a number of other countries as well, and Russian as well. We are translating these documents, and they will be up on the website fairly soon. So you can see and download the Common Principles Standard and also the Decade of Action. What we'd ask is that you support us with where you see communications around this, retweet it on LinkedIn, etc. And also support, we're calling for, as Jean Todt said, as a special envoy for road safety in his case, you need someone to speak about this. You need someone who can actually speak out loudly about the need for fire safety. So we are going to push ahead with, hopefully, at the General Assembly in New York, a request for a UN Special Envoy for fire safety, because we think it's that important. So we do encourage you to get involved, and please do contact me if you need to learn any more about the coalition and would like to learn what we can do to try and help you. So thank you very much. That's my last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strong. It's a very relevant topic coming from a country which is suffering a lot from fires, especially during summer. I see it very important, this topic, and also the initiative for starting this decade, how you call it, decade of?
Decade for Action.
For action for?
For 2022 to 2032.
For what?
For fire safety.
For fire safety, yeah. This was what I wanted to know. So, decade for fire safety. Yeah, and in our case, for example, we are very careful in respecting the standards, fire safety standards for public buildings, less for houses, while the problem is with existing housing. So what to do with the existing housing? And most of the fires that happens are happening in the old houses. And yeah, this is a big problem. Now we've come to an end. I think we have some minutes. Yeah? Yeah, we have some minutes. And if there are questions from the audience, we can take one or two. Or any comment? I don't see any, so I ask Secretariat now to show the decision on the screen. I'm not reading it. I decided not to read because everyone can read it. Okay, thank you. This session for today is also finished. I thank you very much for being here, for attending this session, and for your discussion and for very fruitful discussion and presentation, interesting presentation on different topics that we had this afternoon. And do we have any announcement? Not for today. Tomorrow it starts at 9. So please be at 9 because we start with land administration and management. Thank you and see you tomorrow.